And hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of 4x3. I am Exner. I'm joined here by Ani, of course, Neo Kai. Alongside me, our special guest for today is NER0. And looking forward to having you on, man. How are you doing today?
Yeah, doing well. Thanks for having me. Yeah, good to have a new format, more hot takes.
Yeah,
Get
hopefully.
out there.
Hopefully we get them on out. Just to hop right into the action here. I think the first one we got queued up is Ani's point, if I'm not mistaken,
Yeah,
Paladin. So
yeah.
you go ahead and talk this one through.
I think this is a talking point that a couple of analysts have brought up. I think Maniac especially, considering that Ents have had quite a red hot form as of recent. Second place at Gamers 8, second place at Cologne, and already qualifying for the playoffs of EPL. So a big talking point around that is what is actually propelling them to get to this point, and a big reason for that is SunPius. And I guess I can try to have that conversation with you guys as to whether or not this guy is a top 10 player right now. Because as far as I'm concerned, I still think that there needs to be a couple more tournaments under his belt before we can say that. But yeah, as far as this argument is concerned, I'm very interested to see where you guys fall in because I'm not going to give my answer just yet. I just want to
Okay.
see what you guys have first.
Yeah. Do you want to start us off, Nero?
Yeah, okay. I mean, I think top 10 might be a bit conservative, to be honest. Last few months, honestly. I think he's in like top 5 rating wise. I think last 3 months.
1.2, right?
Yeah, it's like he's sky high. I think top 10. Like I'm trying to think of Orpus better than him, and it's like it's a short list now. It's a really short list, and if you're talking about top 10 players, it's mostly Orpus. So I don't know, I'd probably go strongly agree on it, to be honest, just because I think maybe might be creeping up a bit higher if we're going for currently, at least.
Yeah, I mean, I probably going to follow you there and pretty strongly agree as well. Because again, like you said, recently, he's just been, like you said, playing incredibly. He's been huge and finals, and I feel like especially when that Dallas final came through, it looked like he was like leveling up his game. Everyone's saying that he levels up his game during like playoff stages as well. So that's something that I feel like can take your team the extra mile. And on top of that, I think the reason that maybe people would be a little bit unsure is again like the issue with the Blast partnership. Like if you're talking about Ints, that the couple more tournaments that I think you're looking for, Paladin, are just in some of those Blast tournaments where Ints isn't present, right? Because if you were seeing, like, imagine if they were able to make a just like flawless performance out of the gates in that Blast fall group stage or something like that. I feel like there'd be no question there. But yeah, I think those are the couple tournaments that we're just missing out of SunPius, and again, that's not really a fault of his own.
So I'll leave. You can go last, Annie, since you'll leave it to the field. I'll jump in. I'm with Harry. I'm all the way strongly agree. I mean, I saw HLTV did a tweet yesterday, right, saying like top 5 highest rated players from Group B, and he was like 3rd overall. Nertz was 1st, Crimbo was 2nd, and he was 3rd, and I can't remember who was below them. I like DemQQ was somewhere in there. But yeah, I think right now he's a high rated player on Ents. He's been playing so well overall. And I think he has found this form. I think when he moved originally from Movistar, I had a couple of question marks. I wasn't exactly 100% sure on it, but it seems like at the moment, the last few months, with them going back to back in however many finals, and then continuing to be basically in top 3 of like more or less every big tournament that they enter. In my eyes, I would, without a shadow of a doubt, put him top 10. And like NER0 was saying, I think there's even arguments to start pushing him towards even higher, right? If you look at players who are better than him right now, you can talk about obviously your big hitters like your Zywus, your kind of devices, your Nikos individually. But SunPius is probably going to enter that conversation somewhat soonish, not that long after. So in my eyes, I think, yeah, top 10 feels actually pretty conservative. I feel like right now he is, in current form, last 3 to 6 months, top 10 player in my opinion. Like no shadow of a doubt.
What if we changed it to something more high stakes, like a top 5 then? In that case,
Yeah, honestly,
I think you could. I think you can make an argument for top 5. I generally do. I think you could make an argument and not be seen as like the leper, right? You not be seen as like this outcast there. I don't think it's an outlandish statement. I don't know whether I would. I mean, I need to do a little more research into it, right? Like, but I think even top 5, in my opinion, doesn't really feel that bad. I feel like I could sit here without too much research into it and say top 5. I think isn't he currently the highest rated player on Ents, right? they're obviously been doing so well. I think Nerds is one of the obviously another key reasons why they've been doing so well. But I think SunPius is right now his form has been incredible. Group B, he was sick at Pro League. Obviously, when we look towards recent tournaments as well, like Cologne and GA and whatever, he's obviously been doing well. I think for me, I don't think top 5 is too outlandish. I'll still stay over towards that far right hand side.
Yeah,
say, like,
okay,
he's
sure.
better than Simple so far, honestly.
Yeah, I'd make the argument.
Like,
Yeah.
so like if you're looking above him, it's like Device probably still, Zaiwu, like, Spinks, Nico, and then beyond that, like I guess Munacy maybe, but I think Munacy's more like the highlights player, like more inconsistent, like round to round. Whereas SunPius is kind of like I like him as like the Device regen. He's kind of so consistent, and now he's got the T sides as well because that was bad for a while, especially like start events. But now he's got the T sides. Like I think he's easier to build a team around than Munacy at the moment.
Yeah.
So maybe top 5 is a thing.
I don't know why I thought this would be more divisive, but yeah, I do agree as well. I think the biggest talking point for me is just the big game playing, and I think as of right now, a lot of the top players kind of drop off when we get to those playoff stages, and it does have to be a little bit more of a team effort. It isn't necessarily like you look at Zaiwu. Has always been a huge talking point about not whether or not he's a big game player. Device has still been delivering, and sure, Nico has as well. But I think SunPius has elevated his game that extra 5% that Ents kind of need, because in this day and age, you do need a big star player to kind of get you over the line and to win you a game here or there. And if Ents can actually unlock that off of SunPius, then the world's their oyster. I think they can stack championships eventually if SunPius can hold up his end of the bargain when they get to those finals on a regular basis. But yeah, I think as far as his development goes, it's crazy to see how fast he's developed, because as you guys said at the very beginning of Ents, he was a liability for them, in all honesty. He had troubles playing CT sides where he couldn't actually rotate effectively. He was trying to do too much a lot of the times with his utility and whatnot. But now I think he's kind of ironed out his game. He's gotten his ego in check now that he realizes that he has more pieces around him that can do the job, and it doesn't have to be him doing the heavy lifting when he was on Movistar Riders. And I feel like at this point now it feels like he's kind of locked into another gear, and that definitely helps that he can clutch, he can be that stable opera to get you those 1 or 2 kills, and he I think he understands his role very, very well within the system, which is something that I was not too sure about when he initially got announced, so whether or not he can make that jump, and it's very clear to me that he can.
Yeah,
I don't know if this is cheating, by the way, but while you were talking there, I just looked up his event stats since he joined Ents, and he's had 1 red rating the entire time he's joined, and that was the Paris Major. So arguably, probably the biggest one you wouldn't want to fuck up. Like a 0.91. But aside from that, it's the flurry of kind of green, 1 kind of a 1-1 rating in a close call not so long ago. So yeah, I mean it's pretty fucking good, right? You look at his last 3 events, 1.24, 1.22, 1.17. Also, is pretty consistent across the entire way, considering they always go right to the finals in those as well, or so deep. So
yeah,
I don't know. I feel like that's big for me. I think the big game thing is probably maybe one thing to mention, but even getting to that stage is, I still feel like puts him in that top 5 caliber.
That's the one talking point that I'm kind of shocked a little bit to still be hearing, because when you watch SunPius play, I think he's clearly defining a star opera position, right? Like he's very clearly going for big plays, big picks, and all of them are in the biggest moments, right? So I think every time people talk about Ents, they kind of give them the oh well, they don't have a simple as Zaiwu, a Nico, basically, and now you're having, I guess I wouldn't say the next generation exactly, but SunPius is clearly trying to pick up that mantle, and even Nerds is kind of trying to pick up that as well. So you can kind of see that potential in those players. Just it doesn't have the same name tags, you know what I mean? So I think that's pretty sick. But yeah, and SunPius, I think top 5. It could be a little bit more contentious, but I'm struggling to round out this roster, or round out the list without him with this recent last 4 or 5 months from Ents.
I might give an edge to Spinks here. I think that he's done a lot of serious
go ahead and give
work
me
for
some
Vitality.
your top 5 right now. Then in that case, I would like to hear.
So Zaiwu, Device, Nico, Spinks, and I think I'd put Shiro in there as well. Even though they haven't had as many deep placings, I think Shiro has still performed enough and well enough to a point that even with the previous iteration prior to the super team, he's been putting in work. Of course, there is drop off, and I'd probably put him at like 5, but I think overall, I think that's probably my list. I don't really see
Is
whether he just cracks in instantly.
is that just like your top 5, or are you thinking like
That's my
I'm
top
thinking
5.
I'm thinking it's like HLTV top 5, like end of the year top 5 type thing, like
Yeah,
where obviously they factor in like trophies as well. So that's
yeah.
where like for me, then obviously Shearer takes a big hit,
Cheer
right? 'Cause
drops
he's-
out.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
So like if I'm
Yeah.
thinking
But then
HLTV wise,
does device though? Does device drop off for you then?
Yeah, I was about to say, like, the way we do
yeah,
it, often it's not like trophies, but it's awards, and it's much easier to get awards if you're playing well in playoffs, like the EVPs and the VPs and stuff. Like,
EVPs. Yeah.
a lot of the stuff Peter looks at is actually like, are you basically your team's best player in a lot of games? Like, he looks at each map and he says, this is the player of the match, basically. And
Yeah.
SunPius, every time we do it, because we have like quick calls for MVPs and stuff, SunPius is like crazy for that. Like, if Ents are playing well, like, he'll be at the top. And I know it's AWP or whatever, but it's the impact he has, especially T side. Now he AWPs more aggressively. Like, I think Snappy said as much. Like, he told him to start watching device demos instead of Shearer demos, things like that. Like, that you can see the difference in the game, and he's that impactful guy now. And I think, yeah, that is the top 5. He's definitely like 5th to 10th for me. I think probably top half of that, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, just kind of following up off the development point as well. I think, like, I can't remember where I heard it. I think it was from Deha, who mentioned something about him, like, when he first joined the team as well, still, like, calming in Spanish, getting, like, out of those habits as well, which is, again, like, the fact that you're still doing that when you join a team and, like, you're still trying to get your bearings, and then you come into next year and now we're having this conversation is super impressive.
So my point this week is franchise leagues are better for the esport overall than the open circuit, and this obviously comes with the recent news post Blast Paris major that Valve want to get rid of ESL and Blast kind of somewhat monopoly on who plays in their circuits through the Louvre agreement and all the rest. And basically, yeah, this is essentially the conversation I want to have. That there's an argument to be had that having those ESL leagues with specific teams who, arguably the biggest teams basically, or most of the biggest teams playing, is better for the esport overall than having an open circuit, which potentially could bring in mixers or no names or randoms. So this is the grenade I throw out into this conversation here. So someone can take us from the get go.
Okay,
You go ahead,
so-
Ani.
Yeah, I'm gonna talk about it purely from a competitive aspect because as far as the economics go, I'm not the right person to be talking about it because I don't
That's where I
necessarily
come
know the benefits and the cons of it and whatnot. So I'm sure Neo is going to dive straight into that. But for me, as far as competitiveness is concerned, I think that this is better. Or sorry, it is worse. It is worse to have franchise leagues in comparison to an open circuit. So I will go with strongly disagree here.
Other way. Yeah.
Yeah. But basically, the reason why here is because I personally think that the franchise teams are not showing me the topmost end of their competitiveness when they play against these rosters. I mean, you look at the previous few majors, it doesn't feel as though they're prepared for a random team. When you look back at further back in the game's history, where you would have to play a random team, and the best of the best could stand up to it because they were regularly playing through those open circuits, playing through those open qualifiers, close qualifiers on a regular basis. And that's why when you had number one teams, they had a certain aura about them that they could really dominate any of the opposition, that being the open qualified teams or the veteran teams that go deep in the playoffs. Regardless, they always win. And that's why, they have that era conversation around them because they can't dispatch of any opponent. And as of right now, in the modern day of Counter-Strike, sure, there is definitely a way to play the game in Tier 1, very slow, methodical defaulting. You have some exceptions to that conversation. But for the most part, a lot of these international teams play a similar style of Counter-Strike. Now you throw a tier 2 team into that conversation and it completely throws a spanner in the works. These players play so many maps of Counter-Strike, have to play so much more loose Counter-Strike, and that completely just throws a spanner in the works of how a tier 1 player or team approaches it. I mean, you can just take the one best of one example of ITB playing FaZe Clan on Inferno, right, at the Paris Major, where I kid you not, Cypher is just running up through Banana like every round and popping heads, right? Now, in most scenarios, that wouldn't actually be something that FaZe faces on a regular basis, because why would they? They don't have to play the qualifiers. They're getting invited to every tournament. At that point, they're preparing for a Na'Vi or a Vitality or a G2, where you might have to deal with the Nico, who might do that once every 10 rounds or once every 8 rounds. But you'll be expectant of it. You'll have a protocol in place, and you'll find a way to kind of fill that void as much as possible. When Cypher's doing it every round, you don't really have an answer, right? So, of course, props to him and props to ITB and props to all of these open circuit teams for finding a game plan to play against these top teams. But in my opinion, they just don't have enough reps against these types of opposition to know how to respond to them on a regular basis. That's why you see the upset at the RMR. That's why you see the upsets at the major. I think if you give them enough time to play those types of teams on a regular basis, not only is it going to level up those open circuit teams and basically skill check them and make them realize, is this team legit, or is this team just going to be sold for parts, i.e. an ITB, i.e. a Gamer Legion? Or is this team going to be a Cloud9 and they become stuck in the conversation, i.e. that Gambit core? They are just here to play, right, permanently. And so I think if you give them enough reps in an open circuit, that's where you can kind of actually figure out where the parity lies and whether or not, you know, people are just kind of like frauds, so to speak. But yeah, long-winded, but that's my gist on it.
Yeah, no, I mean, oh, you go ahead, Nero.
Well, I was going to say, it's that thing as well, that after, like, I tend to think it's kind of more to do with the format of the major, because we see these teams again, like, the teams that make these upsets at the major, like, they turn up at Pro League and Cologne and stuff, like, it's, like, they do turn up at these other events, and I don't know if it's just because you can call it Magic the Major, or you can call it whatever, like, the way they have these 160 hours, 2 weeks every time, and obviously they don't do that for the other events, but at these other events, in the best of threes, like, it's a lot rarer to see these kind of upsets in the double elimination formats and things like that. So it's that type of thing where I think if you give the same teams like these tournaments, I do think the best of ones would be the main thing. I don't think you really need an open circuit for that to be true. I genuinely don't think upsets would be that common at all if it wasn't for the best of ones and the shit seeding and things like that. I think that's more of a factor than the franchising, and I know everyone loves to bash on the franchising, but it's kind of only really blast events that do it. Like it's the ESL Pro League. That's obviously a factor, but the Cologne Katowice don't really. Like the Dallas is like they have the partner teams, but there's like half of the event, and then the other half of the event is qualifiers, like local hero invites, stuff like that. So I actually don't think it's as big a deal competitive wise as often it's made out to be. Like I think the difference between a franchise league, like in Valorant, which is terrible, like you can see it's terrible. And then our partnership system, I actually think our partnership system is quite good for the game, honestly. I think it gives a lot of secure money, which means you can plan long term. Like if you're a GM of a team and you're like, okay, we have Pro League twice a year, so we can afford to buy this player and spread his contract over this many years or something. Like it's things like that I think actually help. And in your open circuit, it's so cutthroat. And I know that's kind of the glory of it. That's like as a sports fan, you kind of want that kind of cutthroat, but I think overall for the business, I think you do kind of want security in terms of which teams are going to turn up to every event. Because like in the old days before partnership, you just had invites. Some people used HLTV rankings, some people literally just plucked them out of a hat and just were like, these are the famous teams, they're at the event. And no one really cared back then. And this partnership team, all it's doing is kind of adding the revenue share to something that already existed, I think.
Yeah, I guess like for a little bit more clarity, are we talking about like the partnership, or are you going all the way to say like franchising leagues like in Valorant?
No, I'm mainly just talking about.
Are we talking about like
partnerships as a whole? But like I just use franchises like there's no word. Like it's all version.
That's good clarification, because I kind of agree with Nero here. I tend to like at least ESL style of partnership leagues a little bit more than obviously Blast because it's a little bit more cutthroat. In terms of the qualifiers, and the qualifiers are very, muddy. It's a lot of qualifiers to get through basically if you want to make it into some of the bigger events. But
Especially EU teams, dude.
right,
EU
yeah,
teams
they
have
go
to go
through the
through like 3
gauntlet
qualifiers.
for
Yeah.
sure. So my thing is like, yeah, if we can kind of open that up, and I think that they were on the right path. Obviously, again, this whole 2025 like kind of axing the partnerships is going to be a game changer. But like I think the partnership, like you said, it just brings a little bit of stability here. So I'm kind of leaning in towards agree, just because again, I love the points that you mentioned, Ani, of the like competitive nature, and I do think that teams in some of these, like when they're guaranteed invitation spots, they just don't really give it their all, especially when you like look at some like teams that come into like the first stage of Blast and they're like, oh, we use that as a boot camp. And I'm like, that's crazy.
You're getting these spots, man.
Yeah.
You're stealing other people's spots that might care about it a lot more. I mean, look at Ents, dude. Like, I think they could totally run away with something like that, and I think they would be definitely the type of team to run away with that kind of style.
Right.
But when people just basically say this event is a throwaway event as your flagship premier group stage, that's just that feels disappointing.
And
to
it's
me.
because of the formats, again, like Nero said. I mean, we're just talking about like 3 elimination matches that we have. So they come into it and they play like lackadaisical. They don't give it their all. They're not coming in. Even what looked like some of these teams in Gamer today, they kind of hopped on in. They were moseying their way on through. Some didn't want to be there. And then you clearly see that Ents is hungry, and that's something that's really cool. But yeah, I think a large part of it sometimes is a combination of like format being really weird as to why these teams aren't like stepping up at all, and aren't like preparing themselves a lot. And so I like it in principle here. I think there's like a lot of details that just need to be nailed down, but at this point it's like, I guess we don't have to worry about it, because it's probably just going to stay the same until 2025, and then bam, like I guess it's probably going to ease up until 2025, right? Like we're going to figure out ways to kind of wean off of it.
I think the ideal.
Go on, yeah.
Oh no, you go. I was just gonna say, I think the ideal is like you'd still have the partners, but you'd have fewer partners, right? So you'd have so teams like OG, EG, Big, like grow up, like get in the qualifiers with everyone else. But I can see why you don't.
Valid.
Yeah.
Like,
I like that.
Chuck Nip in there as well. I don't want to see Nip. Like,
I think it needs to be more brutal. Like EG had 3 seasons in a row being rock bottom of Pro League. Went into review, and the review was like, fucking hell, they give us loads of money. Let's keep them in. Like, do you know what I mean? But it should be. It shouldn't be a review. It should be a
hard set rule.
The same way we're like in the Premier League, where it's like relegations. Like, if you are shit, fuck off, go away. Like, you're literally you're actively bringing nothing to this league. No matter how big your organization is, I don't know how much money EG bring in. They are not improving tier 1 because they're not tier 1. I mean, aren't they ranked like 56th in the world right now? Why are they getting direct invites to Blast and ESL? So I definitely think so. I'll go where I came from this. So like, there's 2 sides. So I think competitively, this is. Franchise leagues are just objectively just bad. Like, they are just bad. People get lazy. They come into these events, in my eyes, where it's like, people like EG, for example, where they've got just no pressure to ever improve, right? Like, I think, and we saw this for like, since COVID, essentially, where for EG, there's been no pressure to improve, because like, well, fuck it, we're going to get invites to, every single, so we're just going to bring up people from our academy team who
every tournament is a testing ground, basically.
Yeah, we're gonna bring up guys from our academy team who are arguably just absolutely horseshit, cough Wiz, cough Hex, who just aren't tier 1. Like, I don't care. You
hey now.
Wiz
owned
us in a matchmaking game last night.
he did.
So it's like, you know what I mean? It's like you've got this when like, you got Wiz coming up as like meant to be like this, meant to like next regen NA Orpa, when I would actually rather pluck a 16-year-old Russian kid and face it. Like, it's just like a waste of a space. So competitive, I think it'd be great, because I feel like it just means that we get rid of people. I mean, honestly, like OG as well, who are just not looking like a great team right now. Big, who need a drastic more changes. Honestly, needs to go international because there's just not enough talent in Germany. But so compared to it's sick, right? So that I think it'd be huge. Obviously, we saw at the major as well, like the amount of like these stories that come through. And I'm a sucker for a story as well. You know, Magic of the Major, as you said there. I'm a real sucker for that, right? Obviously, we had the glory of ITV, but even stories that are now becoming a bit more consistent, like Gamer Legion playing actually okay. Granted, Pro League wasn't amazing, but Apex doing okay as well. When they've had these like somewhat consistent runs every now and again, where Casnito and Kixon are both playing well, so the team actually looks consistent. These guys are no longer just like tier 2 guys who made a lucky run. They're actually like decent teams now who are in the conversation of like a tier 1.5 and are arguably better than like OG and Big and NIP and shit like that right now. So those things for me, I think is really, really good. I think it's amazing for competitiveness. I think it will make some storylines really cool because we can just talk, you know, like let's say you're like an analyst working on the desk, you'd be like, you've got the whole plot line of how they got here, all the way through the open calls and whatever. It's sick, right? I think we'll start to see a lot more talent come through as well. There'll be a lot more names like your Cyphers, who now is a household name, but of course, 6 months ago, only people in the UK knew him, and I just knew him as Kai Watson, this like little idiot at Epic Land, basically, like this funny ass dude who was like obviously cracked for the UK scene, and like we knew he was good, but like obviously we always just think people in the UK are going to get stuck here.
Mm-hmm.
So it's sick for him. So I think there will be a lot of talent coming through. Like, you know, a lot of people are talking about like this male 09 kid, 14 years old, and he's just like mega talented FPL kid. There could be a chance he makes a mix and does some good work, and who knows, whatever. But I think the big thing that everybody seems to forget in esports, and this is the thing that I speak to a lot of people about, which is just the monetary side of things. Like that having that guaranteed income, if you're someone like ESL or Blast, is massive because it allows you to put on these events. We as esports fans don't pay to watch events the way we do.
I wish we did.
Yeah, football.
we
You know, so in the United Kingdom, for example, on average, you have to pay £1,000 a year to watch football games, to watch every Premier League game. You have to have a BT subscription, Sky Sports, Amazon Prime, plus I think a couple others as well.
That's crazy.
Like, yeah, so it's a lot of money, but we get the best products compared to anyone else in the world, and we have the best commentators in the world, and we have the best analysts in the world, the best ex-pros in the world. So obviously, it still is stupidly expensive, but just as like as an example,
there's a middle ground there too, right? Like,
yeah,
especially
exactly,
for esports.
Right? But we pay to watch, right? And that's how it should be. Where for esports, people are sitting at home on Twitch, and more often than not as well. And hey, I hold my hands up. I'm with you boys, right? I got my ad blocker on. I don't give a fuck. Like my ad block is working overtime, right?
Oh no.
But most people are in there. I'm on YouTube. I blocker on. I ain't seeing shit, right? But what I'm saying,
shameless. You work their events, damn it.
Shameless.
You know me.
Not saying YouTube videos though.
You know me. No, but the thing is, like, we as esports fans do get so much things for free, and when you look at the scale of events as well that we've had, like what I see is just like a normal event in the calendar, right? Which is like a Dallas, for example, which I don't think has the prestige of maybe like a Kato or a Cologne, and obviously not as a major, but it's obviously still like an S tier event and pretty big. The fucking scale of production, how much that stuff costs, is insane, and there's just no way without, like, you know, for ESL's sake, you know, the investment of the Savvy Gaming Group, right, coming in with that like multiple billion, whatever. Or like for Blast, you have the help of obviously the partner teams, which is a much more rigid circuit, and also if I'm right,
and a smaller product too, like less teams.
Exactly. And if I'm right saying the help of the government as well, I think if that's right, I think the Danish government like I've helped Blast out
2 events a year as well.
Yeah, exactly. So the thing, it's so expensive, right? And I think opening the circuit opens up to a lot of vulnerabilities where they loses money from teams, which is a lot of money having these teams pay in. But also, I think one of something that's more important is selling tickets to products. Let's say, you know, for me, I want to go to Kato, right, next year, or in 2 years' time, whatever, when it's open. If I go to Kato for the playoffs, I see the playoffs is like maybe, I don't know, G2, Vitality, and then just like 6 like teams I don't give a fuck about. Like, I'm not going. Like, I'm just not going to go. Like, I'm not going to pay to go and watch that. And I think there's a genuine world where there's that risk has to be weighed up, where it's like, if we get to a playoffs and, you know, there's been upsets along the way and big teams have been knocked out, the big teams are basically just with the massive orgs that bring the viewership.
Yeah.
If they get knocked out, that's going to really hinder ticket sales in arenas. You know, Cologne tickets, I'm sure, don't even make near how much it costs, but it definitely fucking helps, right? So I think there's a big finance thing where I think probably now ESL and Blast and whatnot are actually probably pretty concerned. Maybe not as much ESL, but definitely Blast.
Yeah.
Probably a bit concerned where it's like, shit, man, like, we spend so much. Like, obviously, they've always been known as the scale of production of Blast is incredible, right? And maybe the Paris maybe not so much, but like a lot of their events has been incredible in the past, and obviously they're always great when they go to the Royal Arena. So 4 finals, for example, how much that's going to cost? I think a large part of that what's alleviating the everything in that is just the teams playing into it. So I think that's where for me feel like franchise leagues are better, because it's better for the esports overall. When I talk overall, I'm talking like the health of it, how long is it going to last? If, for example, even when we go towards viewership online, if it's a game, let's say we go to a final, and there's an off chance of a game of like it's Game of Legion Apex, you're going to get way less viewers than if it's G2 Vitality, because those guys have been invited in all the way. So that's where I get worried. I get worried again. I always talk about things on the monetary side, but I do get worried about that sort of thing, because it's insanely expensive to run events, and I think more often than not they don't make a profit regardless, and there's other factors that actually are keeping these companies afloat anyway. And then now opening the circuit, which makes them way more vulnerable to what games are going to be played, who's going to turn up. If the games are shit, no one's turning up. Who's going to be watching online, for example? Like if I fucking want to watch Cologne and I see some CCT ass final, I am not there. Give that a miss. There was no chance I'm watching it. If I see like
2 CCT belt winners.
Yeah, if I see like some like 00 Nation versus fucking who I don't even know. Yeah, something or other. Or like honestly, there's even a world in which you can genuinely make the conversation that a mix could get to a playoff. I know it's definitely odds stacked against them, but it's definitely there. And mixes aren't bringing viewership. Obviously, they're bringing storylines, but then like for a casual viewer is not going to give a fuck if unsigned heroes get to top 8 at Cologne. We do, because we all work in the industry. That's fun as fuck for us. But like if I ask my mate who like tunes in once a year, he's like, "Oh mate, you're gonna watch Cologne? It's unsigned heroes versus Astralis." Like, no, like why? Why would I? Do you know what I mean?
But
That's
I
why I
also
get worried.
I also think that the hand holding for some of these teams are getting a bit ridiculous. It does feel
I
like
agree.
they are getting offered up a lot of. I mean, look at Heroic at EPL, right? Or honestly, take any event that they've been playing in the last year. How many times have we had the conversation about the ridiculously easy bracket that they've been given,
Yeah.
and they still find the way to fumble those brackets and not be able to go deep in these tournaments? I'm like thinking, if I had a different team in here, a different top 10 team in that position, maybe something could be different. Maybe we could have somebody take advantage of those seedings. And so I think that when you give them so many of those opportunities, eventually their level drops down too. And so then you do just have a very even like situation what you're saying. So if I did have Astralis versus unsigned heroes or whatever, yeah, it might be a very even game, and that's not something that I'd want to watch. I'd want to watch like an S tier Astralis versus
Yeah.
a serious underdog like an unsigned heroes, if we'll use it as an example. I basically want, just the best of the best teams at the best of their best levels. I don't want just the names of just to be there, right? I want them to be hitting all of their utility, actually having some innovative strategy, and actually having some sort of a system. I mean, how many times have I seen missed utility across the board from top 5 teams? It's absolutely ridiculous. At least at EPL, I've been seeing just some abhorrent Counter-Strike for the last 2 weeks, if I had to say. And I think that really does come down to people, whether or not they're taking the game seriously. And I think they just need a push to take the game a little
agree.
bit more seriously. And they need like kind of a fire under their ass that, look, the open circuit teams, they're hungry. They're going to come for you if you don't pick up the pace. And I think that's what would just improve the scene dramatically. Of course, I'm always just going to speak from a competitive aspect, because I that's just how that my area of expertise is. I just want to watch high quality games, right? So as far as I'm concerned, that's what I kind of see.
That's kind of where I'm with NER0 when I say like I think this should be a blend of both, in the sense that like if you are going to keep, obviously Valve have made it pretty abundant, it's going to be open, which I think generally is a good thing. I do think being open is great, but I think there needs to be a world in which it's open but still financially viable. But then also on the other side, maybe then it calls upon, basically we have to look at this from the other side of things, where if an ESL and Blast, they scale back their product massively, we can't complain. Like there's actually, this is to keep the the esports as a whole healthy, right? If they are making losses every year, then maybe it calls on them to scale back a bit, essentially work within their means. But like there's a world in which you could do the blend of both, where the partnerships could then have much I guess like tighter rules, much more strict in terms of who gets in and how they get in and how long they last when they're in. Obviously, we've seen the EG situation and God knows however many like
They
tier
got to
one
follow up
teams.
on that if they're going to do that, though, right? You
Exactly,
can't have the
exactly.
EG situation where a review happens and the review leads to nothing. I mean, if there is like a weird world where, somehow FaZe just fall out of contention and just can't compete, you've got to find a way to either you have to give them some sort of a punishment kind of in terms of like maybe you give them like a last chance qualifier or something like that, how you did with VP way back when at like ECS and EPL. Like you could do that if you wanted, but there has to be some sort of punishment in terms of their hierarchy within some of
Yeah.
these tournaments, because if there is no backlash, then we are just going to hit the same sort of low lows when it comes to talking about franchising.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree.
And it's
That's where I
exactly
stand.
like, yeah, the teams you want to cut out are the teams that are like min-maxing their revenue sharing to a way like I don't even blame the players in a lot of these teams, to be honest. Like, it's the orgs. The orgs are literally looking at it and thinking, like, Complexity is a great example. Like, they had the Juggernaut, they spent loads of money on it, and then they looked at it and thought, to get a team that's going to win trophies, like, that's impossible. Like, you just can't sign those players. To have a team that's like top 10 but on high salaries is like worst case scenario. Like, especially with partnership system, you just take a top 30 team that's on low salaries, it's still NA, like, and then Complexity are fine. Like, they're fine with what they've got. They've got a little bit more going for them. But if you get rid of the partnership system, then you do have that conversation of what then? What, you remove the safety blanket from all of these orgs that have these like stable top 30 teams that don't really want to spend more. Like, what happens then? What happens then? Do these orgs just leave? Like, I think that's a conversation you have to have. And is that a case of that's fine and you have fewer orgs, but then they're all paying salaries that are sustainable without like just money from TOs? Like, is that maybe better long term? But it's a topic I flip flop on a lot. But I do think ultimately, like, having a little bit of a safety blanket for the best teams is, even if you get rid of the partnership and the revenue sharing, it's going to be there. Like, if we invites are probably just going to come back, like, in some way. Like, I know that it's going to be the Valve ranking that decides a lot of that, but once they've sorted that out, it's the same thing anyway, really.
Yeah, the invite off the Valve ranking, right? Which is
That's
like,
a good topping point as well, right? It's like I hope that they fix that too, because right now it looks okay from a top-down perspective when you look at top 10, but then you go below top 10 and things start to get really shaky. And I hope that they fix that up, because there are teams like Espionage in there who have done legitimately nothing of note. Teams like Bestia as well in that conversation, who have also even in North America have done nothing of note. Or sorry, just the Americas region as a whole. They've just done nothing of note.
Just you wait, mate. Raptors just won UK Prem. They're getting top 20 next Valve rankings. I can smell it.
I mean, I can
getting
see
worrisome.
What's the prize pool?
But what for UK Prem?
Prem,
15 grand.
Oh.
Yeah, that they're shooting, mate.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
The
boys get a direct invite to the major. Let's go.
Let's go.
Honestly, it's getting a little bit worrisome because the major's actually catching up right now as well. Like, I know it's still like it's what, like 4 months until we talk about RMR like season right now. That's like actually catching up on us, and again, like, we're
I reckon
talking
PGL
about
are shitting it. There's no way they're not. There's no way they're like, oh fuck.
Well, they don't have to do anything, right? They're at the win
right.
Valve at that point.
The thing
gotta
is,
get their shit
Valve
together.
has to get it on board like ASAP here, because they've got to get this whole new ranking system out. Otherwise, we're gonna be going off this prize pool, like, $ gets you a ranking here, and that's gonna be again, catching us all by surprise. And then we're gonna have even more complaints on the.
I'm
teams
sure
that
there's
are
a way
in.
you could rig the fuck out of that as well. Like, like.
Yeah, 90 did. 90
Well,
MVP.
we're
did
gonna,
the show match, right?
we're gonna see in the next
gave them
couple
loads
weeks.
of points.
We're gonna see in the next couple weeks, like what, 3 or 4 online tournaments that are like 500K, like $500,000. We've got like 4 of those this
Thunder
month.
Pick, yeah.
Thunder Pick 600 grand.
Yeah.
600 grand online tournament.
So
That's
like,
so
what if
wins that
Falcons wins that, and all of a sudden they're ranked 1 in Europe? So
Do you know what the thing with this is though, that like for RMR invites especially because they're using this for like closed qualifiers as well, you couldn't have used, like, everyone always says just use HLTV ranking, but the reason you only see 30 teams on HLTV ranking is because it's like not optimized at all for beyond that. Like when you talk about the difference between 60th and 100th, it's like 2 points. Like, the system just doesn't care about those tournaments. So Valve have got a really tough job of trying to factor in like a top 100 team list
and not a lot of
that's
time.
gonna look right. Like, that is very, very difficult. I think they're
Chaos.
probably like, yeah, I don't envy them at all. I think ESL's like, it's got a lot of flack, but you only really need these things to be roughly right. Like as
Yeah.
long as
Mm.
the best teams in the world are at the RMRs, like no one's really going to be complaining. There's going to be a
Yeah.
few weird ones, like because it's just going to take like a few years for a system to be good. But yeah, I don't envy them at all, especially because like they've got other things to do. Like they don't really care. Like
Yeah.
they're not really
There is a
pretending to care
world-
either.
With this benefits like obviously, I mean, in a good way, it benefits the grinders, but like the guys who just play like every tier 2 tournament that's on. Like I always remember like back in 2020 when it was like Sinners and Entropic, like Aliens and Tropic, when those guys and like old Ecstatic as
Yeah.
well, like Wolfie, and those guys would just win everything. And like there's a world in which those guys like if they were in today's system would be like seen as like a top 15 Valve ranked team because they would just win a CCT once a month. I guess back then like Snow Sweet Snow
Yeah.
and 4 Sweet Fall or whatever. But there still was like 100, 150 grand like a month, right? So they're walking away with the lion's share of that, and they're massively inflating. You all know how like what they're like when when Sinners came to tier 1, they were just got absolutely battered. When Elian tried to even scope in tier 1, the guys got like completely fisted. So like there's just like no chance. Like so yeah, it just feel like the impossible task. But
I got one more question here, and I know we've been going a little while on this topic, but I just have a question about like what this looks like in terms of like products as well, because like if there's a lot more open qualifiers here, just from a selfish point, because both you know, Paladin and Neo and I do cast a lot. Like, what do you think the broadcasts are going to start to shape up to be in that case?
Well, then
more
people have to
work
start.
for us.
Yeah, well, that's one thing, right? Obviously.
So I just go
But-
ahead and
but I-
move us
We're
to
gonna be busy.
strongly
We're gonna be busy.
disagree. Let's go ahead and move Neo and I to strongly disagree
move
here.
Move them puppies left. We're gonna be busy, boys.
I mean, that's a great part about it for sure. But
Yeah.
but I think on the other hand, it's like I do think that the tier 2/tier 3 scene has been pretty neglected ever since DreamHack Opens kind of disappeared from the calendar. I mean, how many times did those kinds of tournaments leapfrog a potential top 30 team into top 20 conversation and give them that kickstart that they needed to start a new roster? Of course, the example that I always give is the very first iteration of Vitality when they first debuted with Zywoo. They went to a DreamHack Open tournament, they won that, and that kickstarted the kind of seriousness that roster had for a long time. And of course, now they're at the very peak of their powers, but it all started somewhere. And I think that was such an important part of the scene. And that has been seriously neglected. We used to have like 8 to 10 DreamHack Opens a year, and now we have 4 a year. And that too, it's just spaced very weirdly, where you have 2 in like a span of 2 months, and then a gap of like 6 to 8 months, and then another 2 on like November, December, which is fine, but it doesn't necessarily serve the purpose of helping those kinds of top 30 teams and top 20 teams. And I think overall, if those tournaments did exist, it would make Valve's job very easy, I think, or easier, I should say, because you do have another sample size to work off of with similarly ranked teams. And I think now people might even start making broadcasts for closed qualifiers, like even just these third-party organizations, just because they do matter a little bit more.
And they'll be better
considering-
teams, most likely, if they have to play through the qualifier.
Right, and if they're forced into that situation, then hey, I mean, it does make for a better broadcast in the sense that there is just more competition, and I do like that.
But we need to stop this single. Like, if it's going to be this many open close qualifiers, it can't be these single elimination brackets. Like, you need to do. We need to literally like just completely embrace the way chess do these. Like, they have like 600 people turn up to an event, and it's just one big Swiss group. Like, Swiss doesn't need to be 16 teams. This is a completely like made up thing. That Swiss has to be 16 teams. Like, it's just any multiple of 8 or whatever it is. Like, just do Swiss, have multiple elimination, and then you just run one qualifier instead of like 12. Like for the RMRs as well, they run like 5 qualifiers just hoping that that's enough chances. Like, just run one qualifier with a good format, and it's fine.
Yeah.
Like, that's
Isn't like
that's all we need.
ESEA Open and shit? Like, isn't that all Swiss? Isn't that
I
basically
think
how it
so.
works?
Do you ever play NER0? Like the UK
Yeah, yeah.
University
Oh, yeah.
League? Yeah, that's
Honestly.
Swiss as well. Like, it's possible. It's
Yeah. They've changed it to a league system Swiss now. Like,
oh
like
Christ.
top
Open
8
is
and
glory
tier 1.
days.
Open is
So,
Swiss?
top- Isn't that how it works? Like,
Open-
you're,
It's
Open
points,
was-
right?
I didn't know
you
that.
can
Open
play.
was,
It's
I
like
think-
I don't think it's
if you've got 6 wins and they've got 6, isn't that like a similar version of it? Like you like you play people like the same
With the same
level
record,
as
yeah,
you,
that's
and
all
you-
Swiss.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So it is just Swiss basically.
So,
Also
yeah.
like Null in like same thing, but like now they got like Div 1, so like top 8 at Div 1, and yeah, you move down the divisions. Obviously, I had no being Div 1,
Yeah.
back in my heyday. You know what I'm saying?
D1 baby.
but no, like go back like for where I like put myself generally. I think I like competitive side is amazing. I love the stories obviously because we had things like Into the Breach, right? And we had like obviously Viperia make it to the RMR, which is sick as well. We should have had Coalesce though if Azu wasn't literally shitting himself with food poisoning. So we would have been great if we could have had 3 teams there at the RMR. So I think it's sick, right? Competitiveness is gonna be amazing. I do think there's a lot of question marks how they're gonna change the circuit. I think probably they're gonna be slowly implemented over 2024. We obviously kind of made a joke about there's a lot more work for us. That actually might be the case, but also there's also a strong world in which they just make it open quals, open IPs,
Yeah.
and it's like fuck it, whoever wants to take it, take it. So also it could be the other way too. And then maybe obviously with it being, not having the guaranteed money from teams, they actually do do a lot of the qualifiers as open quals and just say here's the open IPs, watch them if you want, and they focus their money on the main event. Which also then could go the other way. I mean, less work for us. These are all kind of scenarios I've been thinking about in my head. So it could actually flip the other way too. Obviously, that's a much more selfish approach in the sense of work-wise. But like for team-wise, competitive is very good. I think it is really sick. I do just also from a more finance background, just look at the side of the TOs. Like look at ESL and look at primarily a bit more Blast who don't have that backing from some Savvy. Just thinking like shit, like they're probably gonna be thinking like, fuck, how do we now like recoup a lot of this money that we spend on our grand productions here? 4 finals with the whole stage setup they've got and all the rest. How do we make this back basically because we're not having the guaranteed
Dabby
money
will
from
help.
teams. Yeah, and Valve, I'm sure. Probably, I know Valve for damn sure won't help with teams, but also there's another world where like teams are inflating wages massively. That has been a big issue for ages, and like teams look at Valve as like the bad guy massively, and then they're paying players like 50 grand a month, and it's like you are the problem here. Like it's not Valve. You're the one who've inflated the prices here. So it's not Valve's problem here to bail you out just because they have loads of money and have a really good business model and make profit. Like it's not their issue. So that's the thing. Obviously, we're kind of in a weird state now where there's a world with because of the lack of franchising, teams could fall off, and we could see maybe FaZe not guarantee themselves making it to events, or Heroic, same thing for them as well. And obviously, the two I picked them specifically because they're both in massive financial problems as organizations. Heroic nearly shut down like 2 months ago. FaZe on the brink of shutting down regardless, about to be delisted from the Nasdaq. When they get delisted, probably so many of their VCs pull out, right? So they're in the shit. There's a world in which they could be all fucked, but I think it's probably the start of a healthier ecosystem overall where people are actually a bit smarter with their money. So I think short term it might be worse, but long term I think it's for the better. And I think that's where I stand on this. Like as an overarching point, with my conversation yesterday, I think overall this is going to be massively helpful for the thing. But I think short term, TOs, teams, everyone's going to struggle where it's going to be a massive change from having this regimented circuit to now being the Wild West, right? So we could see like I said, randoms make it, which is really going to hurt viewership, hurt numbers in the stadium, etc., etc. But that's where I stand. I think long term, but I went to long term, I'm talking like more towards like 3 to 4, 5 years, whatever. Short term, that's where we're going to feel the hurt, and that's where we're probably going to see a lot of things come down. Player wages are going to come down, buyout is massively going to come down because teams have to be a little smarter, thinking like we could buy this player, but like there's no guarantee anymore. Like there is no guarantee we make it here. TOs are going to be a little more smarter in terms of their spending, maybe in terms of, like maybe for 4 finals, we scale back the production a little bit. But is our main products, maybe one of the others takes a hit. Maybe like, Blast Washington. Maybe Washington's too expensive. So then becomes like Blast, I don't know, Maine. You know what I mean?
They already
Kansas
kind of
City.
tossed on
Kansas
Washington,
City.
aren't they?
Yeah, just Blast.
Washington event
like,
was nowhere near as big as their normal spring finals.
Yeah, exactly. What, Annie, what's some like cheap ass state in America or Cole?
I said Kansas City.
Kansas City, yeah. Can we have just Blast Kansas City?
You do
or,
Blast
like,
Kentucky.
Yeah,
To my
Blast
stomping
Louisville.
grounds.
in the middle of like butt fuck nowhere in America, just because because what they cost. I mean, granted, it probably is one small solution to a wider problem, but I think that is like something you would expect, and I think fundamentally it will come to a point where, if all this happen, and if I see people online complaining like, these guys are scaling back, pay, motherfucker.
Yep.
Stop sitting
Yeah,
there for
yeah.
free, you bitch. Like pay. This is what I thought Blast TV was gonna be. I thought Blast TV was gonna be a subscription service, and I was down. I was like, this is fucking
Yeah.
smart.
I would
This
have
is
paid
so
for
smart.
it. Yeah, hell
It's
yeah.
like Sky Sports for CS:GO. This is brilliant. This is literally perfect. You have to justify it with what they bring to the table in terms of there has to be much better content and much more content. But I think they're starting to do that gradually. Where I think like even now, recently, I played something yesterday, which was like a GeoGuessr for CS:GO. Fun as fuck. Super easy to make, I think. But fun as fuck. It's small things like that. But that is the thing long term, I think. We'll have to wait and see. But I think this is the whole conversation, basically overarching of esports winter, more or less.
And for the final point here today, guys, we got my point is gonna be Heroic needs a roster change. Obviously, something interesting that's already been mentioned is some of the pathways that Heroic have had to their deep playoff runs, but typically these guys are always super solid when it comes to making it to playoffs. I think that's led to no one really having to worry about this discussion, but recent form maybe, especially I would just say after like a tough loss to Gamer Legion in that semifinal in the Blast Major, I just feel like this team is really struggling when it comes to like actually maintaining that same sort of calling, that same sort of fluidity that we saw at like the beginning of the year, the end of last year. So yeah, I guess I can go first here, just talk about my thoughts here on this roster. And again, I mean, I kind of built all that up to make it seem like I'm going to be strongly agree, but I'm actually floating over here towards disagree. I think that they obviously didn't look great here. I mean, EPL looks like they're falling apart a little bit, and I think what's kind of fundamental for this team is the leadership that Cadian brings to the table here. So I just think that that's something super important that we have to keep in mind going in, and I think Cadian has a tough task at hand right now because finally we're seeing this roster need a little bit like of a revival. They need like some sort of like boost and motivation. It's being said in interviews like Cadian talking about how this isn't our like best level of CS, and then you watch them lose out in the rest of EPL groups. Like that sort of headline and then the results that followed suit is very worrisome. But this is going to be, I think, one of the so far Cadian's like biggest tests, maybe not in his career, but like so far with this heroic banner when it comes to trying to build back when things are going like bad, basically when they're not making playoffs consistently, when they're not being able to say, hey, we missed out on a title, but at least we made a deep run here. The question is Cadian going to be able to bring that energy to his team? Is he going to be able to level out the roster here and build back? Because I feel like they still have the right pieces. It just doesn't seem like there's that same motivation anymore.
I might as well just jump in here and give you the exact opposite of your opinion and say that I definitely think that it does sound knee jerk and it does sound like kind of jumping the gun, but I think that they do. And the reason why is I think that I don't think that this heroic team is going to eclipse any of their previous results, especially with the mentality that all of these players have right now. I just don't see a world where these 5 players can somehow find a way to bounce back from something like this, considering how already mentally fragile this roster is anyways, right? Like even bar this EPL loss, you think about how many mental gymnastics they had to do to win that fall final, or not the fall final, the spring final, where they're telling themselves that, oh, we're definitely not, like, I don't know how much of a publicity stunt it is. I don't know. I don't care. The fact that you're running with that concept alone, saying that, oh, we're not supposed to be here. We're not supposed to win, but we'll play it out or whatever the hell. Like, that's just ridiculous. And every little bit of PR that I got, even from the EPL like promos and stuff, they would talk to them and be like, I think one of the questions they asked Caden was like, what threat do you bring to EPL this season? And he answers with, we don't have any threats this season. We're just here to play Counter-Strike. Like, who says that? Like, what leader says that in any sense of the word? That kind of mental space that they're in right now is something very dangerous, and I don't think that's something that they can just get out of automatically. And moreover, I mean, even in the server, I'm seeing a lot of dips in form from players like Stown, I don't really feel like I have that kind of aura of a strong Danish player from him anymore. He's kind of just there, which is it's not a problem. He's still getting his numbers, but there's that 5% that we were hoping for from him to go over the top and become a star player within Denmark. But that conversation has slowly dipped off in form. Shush is still doing his job, but Yabi hasn't necessarily had those big game performances that we were hoping for from him. And then, of course, I think the elephant in the room is Cadian's individual performance on the AWP has reached a new low. Like I will kid you not, there are so many times within this EPL group stage where he just could not land shots, just period. Like just straight easy shots. He just could not land them. And I do have to think that there's just so much on this guy's plate. He's first of all created one of the best systems in modern Counter-Strike, period. But that does require a lot of moving pieces, right? A lot of these players, you are micromanaging, you are trying to get these round by round bases for all these players to be in the right possible place, and you're spinning a lot of plates in that sense, and that in turn is really hampering his individual form. And when you have the most expensive gun in the game, I'm sorry, you have to deliver some sort of impact, and I'm not even getting some impact, I'm getting no impact from him, and that is just severely hampering him. And prior to this, you could have had a strong enough rifle core that you didn't need an elite AWP and win. But now that your rifle core is also even though your rifle core is already dropping off, you do need that AWP to back you up, and you just don't have that. So for me, I think that Tessis's form has dipped too far below heroic standards, and I think that he'd be the first on the chopping block, and then I'd try to pick up an AWP. Sure, there aren't any amazing
that's where I want to get
right
you right
now.
now. That's exactly where I want to get you, because they obviously have to keep the Danish core here, right? They have to keep the roster going. I don't see any better option that would make this team. I mean, honestly, back in the day when I saw Heroic and they were making a lot of deep runs and they picked up Yabi, got rid of Refresh, I thought that was a mistake back then. And obviously, I think they were able to maybe get a marginal increase, enough to keep that form and maybe even improve upon it here. But I feel like right now, adjusting it would be a little bit too much of a risk. And especially if we're looking for oppers here, we're not going to get a lot of Danish oppers that are going to bring up that level enough to be, a title contender. And so that would be I'm with you. That's the one roster move that I would have to make. I don't want to change up the rifle core again. I don't want to get rid of those systems and add more spinning plates to Cadian's list and trying to build in a new player to a new structure that he's not familiar with. I would just like to get a new opera that can bring it. And the only opera I would say is maybe Device that you could obviously make a big improvement on, but that's not really an option.
Well, I was gonna say, this is
no way.
But this is the thing, is there's so many international teams now, and Denmark is trying to have two top Danish teams, and there's realistically, if we're being honest, there's only enough talent for one. You can make a Danish super team that is gonna be able to go further than what Heroic had, but with either team's budget, neither of them are known for spending loads of money. This is not. Right. It's just not going to happen. They're too spread out, and it's going to be the same thing. But I think, honestly, the biggest issue in those playoff games, I think the Game Legion loss probably broke them, and the spring final was a bit of a band-aid that we didn't notice.
Yeah.
I think that Game Legion loss, it was yet again Stown. I think has never really convinced me. I just think he's such a group stage merchant. I know those stats don't mean everything.
I can see it.
It's ridiculous how much and I think people don't realize how much, because everyone always talks about Heroic rifles all have the same role, all of this, but not Stown. Stown's crazy beta. Stown is more of a beta than Blamef, and I'll put my hill on that. The way Stown plays, I know it's part of the system, I know it's intentional, but the way Stown plays is ridiculous for how few frags he actually puts up. And if he's going to be your star player, I know he's been around calling. I know there's a lot of factors, but he's been at tier 1 long enough that he needs to be playing better than he is right now. And I think Yabi as well. I think Heroic looks when Heroic looked best, it was when Yabi was their best player. And at the moment, he's their worst player, statistically.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're looking at in the last few events. That's the drop-off. It's I think Tessas and Shush are actually still doing their job. I think Katie is probably at some point the IGL has to be blamed for individuals this choking. Think of how much flack Carrigan got when his team chokes all the time. It feels like Cadian escapes that. Cadian, because the system's so good and visibly so good, you can still see
it's
the
also
IGL.
Good for him as well.
It's good.
Individually, I feel like he gets to perform a little bit better than Carrigan would in a final or something.
Yeah, which helps. But if you're choking this many times, like, yes, your star player is a bowl job, but it's kind of got to fall on you a little bit as well. And Yabi's drop off, like, there has to be more to it. There's no way this guy can be this bad after being so good for like a good like 9 months. He
Yeah.
was up there.
But the thing is, right, and this is where like I've always done this. It's like you can say like, yeah, they need a roster change, which is like, you know, it would take in that question just literally just as it is. Then yeah, and of course, you know, we look over to a strongly agree, and we probably all sit there. And
Yeah,
of
right.
course, they're not winning, so of course they all need they all need a roster change. But can they make a roster change? And that's where it's, well, no. Who do they pick up? They're not going to get Device. Let's not beat around the bush here. But Charlotte have way more money than Heroic, who are on the brink of, you know, they're begging their, like, any company will hear them out every 2 minutes for some money. So, like, obviously, they're not going to have any money spending-wise. And then they can't look towards the tier 2 because who's the second best tier 2 team? Ecstatic? And Annie, let me not start here. You know what I'm going to say. So let me not start cooking. But
let's talk about him. Let's talk about Salazar, man. What do you not think he's good enough?
If you're dropping negative ratings in tier 2 lands, I don't even want to imagine what's going to happen in tier 1. So
Yeah,
there just isn't anybody next. I like one guy I would say who is young and in the future could be pretty good is like Jaboan from Australia's Talent. I think he's actually pretty good, but he's like 16 just turned 17. He's like a new Australia's Talent kid.
Okay.
They just picked
Is he
him
an
up.
Opper?
He's like Orpa, yeah,
Okay.
Orpa. Like, he just turned 17. I think he was like, he might even still be 16.
So there's
He's
some
like,
future there for sure.
there's like guys in the future, but there's not. You know,
Yeah.
you're not gonna be ready for 2, 3, 4 years or whatever. But
Right.
like,
You wouldn't want to try Acor at all?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so.
No.
I might be willing
Acor's
to
failed
give that.
once. I think Acor in the same
But
way we
it's-
can maybe make the arguments right now, but Immer was maybe a bit of a system merchant in the same way as well, right? Because look at Acor prior to Game of Legion, where it was an absolute fucking clusterfuck, right? Granted, we can make all the conversations about the IGL and Dexter and all the rest, right? But I still think there's a world.
But we believe in Cadian as an IGL, though, right? So couldn't he make it work with the Acor as well?
But then do you want Cadian being a
believe
primary
the IGL?
rifler?
Yeah, you're gonna get a drop off there, and I feel like I think Acor might actually be the only option you would ever go for at the top of this team when it comes to, like you said, like the money that they're gonna be willing to spend. I actually like that more because of the system part as well. Like he can work so well within that heroic system. Cadian, he's gonna drop off, but I don't think it's gonna be like super severe. I think he could still.
But it doesn't matter. I think at that point, you could just make him like an entry rifler and just go out and die like every other European IGL right now. It doesn't have to be necessary. He can just play within the pack at that point, and he doesn't have to have these crazy heroic plays that just fall apart for no reason. And you know, you don't have those Gamer Legion situations happening on Inferno again. It's like I want him to be a little more selfless. I think that I don't like that he's playing so much of the system around himself in certain situations. He has having players buy him AWPs in situations where they're completely saving, and then he does nothing with the gun. I mean, there's certain rounds where I just feel like there are oversights in the system, and I have to say that I think it's just because they're surrounding that conversation around him rather than the rest of his players.
Do you think there's a loss in belief in that then? Because I mean, we've talked about the moment that kind of broke heroic here in terms of like this year so far, when we've seen that drop off of all of the riflers here, and obviously if you're going with like the system that Cadian's working with here, Cadian's already complaining quite a bit about the mistakes being made, the cracks in the system that he's put together over these last couple of years. And do you think that comes through from the riflers losing a little bit of the faith in like Cadian's calling here? Do you think that's a big
There's a mental problem there. It's not ability wise. We know ability wise this is a team that can win. Like,
yeah, but I'm talking like,
right?
do they still have faith in their IGL basically as the riflers?
I'm sure there's some bit of wavering, right? Because of course, when you think of, I mean, the obvious example that I could give is TSM to Kerrigan, right? Is like this team consistently would make semifinals. They would realize, hey, we're not winning anything. We're getting to the points where we're beating every good team to get here, but we can't actually close it out and win championships. Something's not working. Maybe it's our IGL, and that's where that conversation eventually came through. And when they moved over to Astralis, of course, Glaive came in, and the rest was history. But you do have to look at the common factor is that there was doubt, and it wasn't necessarily that Kerrigan was a bad IGL. It just was
The doubt.
no belief in the IGL, and I think that
Yeah.
it drops off in form just slightly. And it's happened in so much. You can keep giving Kerrigan as an example in all of his rosters. In all honesty, you had the FaZe roster as well after their Krakow collapse. They could never bounce back from that. And then you look at the Mouse Sports roster as well, post online, and then once he got the call back from FaZe, the rest was history. But I think that it's a very similar situation where there could just be a little bit of doubt, and I'm seeing these kinds of comments not just from Kading. I'm seeing these types of comments from the players themselves. Like Tessas was another player that was saying these kinds of things. And if that's happening, I mean, it used to be like undoubtedly like Kading is our leader. We're gonna listen to everything he says. You know, he has those heroic little speeches before every one of those games, and they're all fired up. I don't see any kind of that passion anymore. It just feels like
But
this
it's just
team is
hoodoo.
lifeless.
Like,
Do you know? I think this is. I honestly, I'm gonna throw it out there. I'm gonna go strongly disagree, just because I think honestly, like Katie had said, he was ill before Pro League. Their bootcamp got fucked. They've delayed their bootcamp to after Pro League. I think they've already overperformed compared to their rifle core. Like I think the difference with TSM is that TSM had Dupree, who was a top 10 player, and Device, who was like a top 4 player. Right? This team doesn't. This team is overperforming its firepower massively, and the only Danes that are available that would improve this team, I'm not having this Akel thing. I think Akel's ceiling is not that much higher than Cadian's, if I'm being honest. The only Danes that would improve
Ceiling though.
ceiling.
Yeah.
Ceiling. Like Cadian is one of the better players in big games compared to the rest of Heroic. Like,
is he?
like,
I think so.
Is he really?
Yeah. Like his individual decision making does let him down because he plays Hero Ball, right? He plays Hero Ball, but why is he playing Hero Ball? Because his star player's got 10 kills. But so it's Device and Blame Earth. Device and Blame Earth are the two Danes that could improve this team, and they're not going to leave Astralis ever. So you're looking at it. I don't think a roster change is the solution until at least the end of this year. Like if this continues, no chance. Conflict for Down maybe full agenda, but no. I don't think so. I think
I
think
mean, if
you've
we're
got to
going
wait
on
until the end
Valve
of this year.
ranking, Espionage looking pretty good. Get my boy Lucky back. That's what I'm saying. Lucky.
This is what we're looking at,
the
right?
redemption arc of Lucky. He's fucking back, baby.
There's just no depth in this Danish scene anymore. Like, there's no depth in any scene. Like,
It's
the answer is to go international or to have one Danish team.
Yeah.
Like, unless Astralis just pull out the big bucks, and they're not going to do that. Like, this is
I mean,
not.
realistically,
That's
looking
not
back
what
on
we're
it,
talking about.
6 months ago, Heroic would have loved the stare, right? I mean, like, or like that would have been.
Really though?
I don't know. I think
Who just had an improvement on?
It's a good question, but I just do think he's just one of those players who I've seen what he can do, and I feel like he can play at a good level. I don't know. I feel like I think more changes need to come to the rifles rather than the AWP. That's where I stand. I think this Heroic is nothing about Cadian. It's basically where I stand. No matter what his performances say, I think.
Yeah, no, I'm not denying that. I think the Cadian should remain on this roster no matter what. I'm just saying that I think that he just got too much on his plate right now. That he can't focus on.
Maybe.
I mean, he has to be a leader. He has to be a captain. I mean, he has to be like this emotional, like
Sometimes
placeholder
a
for all
star
these
in
players.
big games,
and
too.
sometimes, yeah, he has to be a star. And I don't think that he can be a star if he has the all the other responsibilities that he has on this roster. And I just think that there needs to be something for him to give away some of that responsibility to somebody else.
So maybe a coaching
I think the easiest.
change.
Sure. I mean, maybe you could try to get somebody a little bit more engaging. I mean,
Yeah,
that could be a
that
little
would
bit more
take one of those
emotionally
plates
Little more
off
vocal
of
guidance, right?
his. Yeah, I mean that just takes one of the plates off his like like multitasking right there. Is him not having to be the emotional leader 100% of the time.
They need to replace Casper Strauss as well. Like, he was huge. Like, you could tell he was huge emotionally wise. Like, keeping them on it. Like the type of interviews you're talking about, that didn't happen when he was there. And I think the improvement in Astralis as well. Like, it's not a coincidence. Like, the energy in Astralis, like, having been to a few events, like before and after, like, it's almost like they flipped. Honestly, like the vibe of the camp. But I think, I think Heroic. The missed opportunity is letting Device go back to Astralis, but then you could say that for anyone. You could say that for Liquid. Honestly, I'd probably say it for FaZe as well. Like all of these teams would have been improved by Device, and he wanted Astralis and he got Astralis, and then it just leaves Heroic in this situation where, like ideal world, you can say like a roster change is kind of needed because they're at that point where they've hit their ceiling. Like, I understand why you'd want a roster move. I just think the options out there are so bad that You
That is
just
true.
can't
Yeah.
justify it.
I
That's
kind
It's
of
just
why I
sad.
like
It's
him,
just
but
sad to see this
it is
this
sad.
system just fall apart. You know that's my main issue is that I don't want some of these players who are slotted into such a system to just kind of not believe in it anymore and it potentially just fall away to nothing.
Do you know what though? Like blame F for Stown. I actually think I think they would have won more trophies. Than
They just got to prey on
Yes.
Astralis running out of money. I think that's the main.
I
name of
think
the game, 'cause
Heroic
one
ran
of these
out
players
way
have to leave.
quicker than Astralis.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
true.
that's true.
Both
I,
of
see,
them.
I swear I see
They're
a
both
dessert
preying on
article
each
every day.
other's. Yeah.
Yeah, on each other's down.
What's the
Well,
Danish
I-
Dream Team though? What is the best five? Like
Device?
apart from like exclude like Snappy and Carrigan and all that, but like that's within the Danish scene right now. What do
Okay,
you
so
think?
obviously Device is first
I
choice
kind
for
of-
everybody. There's no debate
kind
there.
of wish-
And then second, Borup, joking.
Can we
I don't
get
know.
can we get
Shush,
Snappy
shush
in
now.
there? Because I feel like Snappy might be.
I feel like that's
I guess I
that's
would be.
too
I mean,
easy,
it's
right? That's too easy.
it would
Snappy
be.
or Carrigan.
Yeah. Then in that
And
case,
Snappy also looks more comfortable in international teams, anyways. Now it looks like he's
Yeah.
kind of that ship.
I'm
has sailed
sure his
with
buyout's
Protein.
massive, by the way. Like, there's no way he's
Oh.
like. I don't think
or
Heroic
if he
can
even
afford
wants to
him.
leave at this point as well.
I think Ents and Snappy are like
Yeah.
as one now. I don't think
Yeah.
I don't think he's going
They put
anywhere.
so much faith in him, right? I think
Yeah.
he's got to reward. He's got to repay
He's
it.
get,
I
yeah,
think-
for sure.
Him and Saw
Seems
run
like a
that
loyal
ship.
dude.
It's great.
Okay, so keep going here. So far we have.
Okay, so you need IGL. I think Cadian rifle probably like a bitch rifle, like Belgium was saying.
yeah.
I think that's what you need. You need Cadian bitch rifle, device on the AWP. I think Blame is the best rifler they have. I think Blame
I'd
has to be
agree.
there.
And then you get
And then
Shush.
last two,
Shush.
Shush is your
Shush,
anchor,
yeah.
yeah.
Support,
Yeah.
supporting
And then you
rifler.
need one more like rotate star rifler. Like Blame can play in the pack or Lurk. I'd probably rather have him in the pack, and then Lurk, like I don't know, like you'd say Yabby
I
a few months
guess
ago, but this is the
Buzz,
gap.
dude.
This is the gap.
Buzz?
I don't mind Buzz.
Is
but
this Buzz? Is it really
I
Buzz?
think he has.
I
more
feel like
poten-
Yabby
I feel like
has-
we've seen the best out of Yabby, but I think we haven't seen the best out of Buzz. That's probably why I stand.
That's
Well, we've seen
fair.
flashes of it for sure
Yeah.
at Cologne.
Yeah, and I feel like
but-
with a good like a stable core around him in a way, like with like those level, then surely we'd see.
I would take Yabby though in his peaks right now. I feel like Yabby has some like really good timing, especially if he's comfortable, if he has like players that he can trust, especially if he has like these pack players that are going to be taking so much space and confidence. You're gonna have Device going for some plays as well. So I feel like Yabby
But it's-
underneath this system.
it sounds
would
like
be-
even if you had a different fifth there, like I still think that team wins championships. Like
Yeah,
I think you go
100%.
either or.
Right.
It is just kind of ridiculous.
even
that
still, it's
neither
just
of them
like-
has funds.
it's just like combining two of the best Danish teams, like just taking pieces from
But
both
this
of them.
is but this is what would have happened like 5 years ago when buyouts weren't so crazy, right? Like
Yeah,
these players
yeah.
would be on the same team. Like I it seems like the Astralis guys are trying to squash the beef as well. It very much seemed like a Glay thing. Like it's not impossible. I think it's probably just a contractual thing, and that's kind of a shame as well. But I do think like whether you keep Stown, maybe there's too many voices if it's Stown and Blame F and Cadian, maybe that's an issue. But then you
Yeah,
could have
too-
Blame
too
F
many
lurking, and then it is
contradictions.
pretty fucking stacked. Like Stown Blame as your rotators, like that's pretty ideal, and Shush Cadian anchoring, like that's not bad at all. It's just maybe too many voices, but main issue is contracts. It's contracts. If Heroic go bust and Astralis keep Borup and Stare and Buzz, like, I mean, I
Yeah,
see
I
what
feel
I
like
see
we're also
why. Maybe
saying
it's sunk
this-
cost fallacy, like whatever. But
We're also saying
know.
this is if either of these organizations have the money to make this happen. Like Astralis are notoriously a little bit like skimpy in terms of their spending,
stingy
and
as shit.
Heroic are in the fucking gutter. So like, there's just no chance. It's a nice thought process, but I think if we're going back to just like realism, like I don't think Heroic need to change because they just can't make a change. There's nobody they can pick up unless we start like getting a little bit funky fresh for it and say like minus Tessus and Shush, bring back fucking Esser tag and get my boy Bubsky out of retirement. But then we're getting wild and wonderful.
S-Tag was the rumor, right?
I like
Have you
Estag.
heard the
I
Estag
still
thing?
think Estag. Yeah, I did. That's kind of partly why I brought it up. I genuinely
Crazy.
think Estag can get one more shot, and I think if things are going so bad at Heroic where they feel like they need to get change, I don't think Estag's back. He is, as everybody
He'd
always
have
was. Anybody,
faith, yeah.
anybody who ever plays Estag, but like I think that there's two reasons for it. Anyone who ever plays him, so he's a jack of all trades, so he can do anything, and we've all kind of seen it. He kind of plays every role anyway. Maybe not to the best, but like if you see someone to slot in, there we go. But I think the main reason why I like the Estag pickup, he's 27, dude. He's actually experienced. He's all kids around. Katie's like a single mom trying to take 4 kids to school. Like it's a fucking nightmare, dude. Like he's like I can't look after them. So like I feel like just having like one guy who's like obviously I don't know Shush and Tess aren't really that young, but it's just like having a little bit guy who's like had like a longer term like career. 27 years old. I mean, Shush is like second oldest, right? Isn't he like 25? Is he or something like that? 24, 25, something like that. But yeah, just having like some guy like SX a little bit older. I don't
24.
think it'd be.
I feel like that
24, yeah.
responsibility could be put on to a coach here as well. Again, I kind of want to
But then
pressure
who,
that.
right? What Danish
Trace,
coach do they get?
maybe. I mean, of course, he
I-
just went to ITB, but Trace
I'm
was
sure
a
they
pretty
can buy
loud guy. He could be lying.
Yeah,
They'll
but
put
then
it out.
again, if he was that good, why
Cadian's-
would Charlotte let him go?
You always talk about IGLs and coach combos, right? And I
Yeah.
think Cadian is kind of, he needs like the Robin figure. Like I think like, there's a
100%. reason
reason players don't talk about exist. Like Cadian needs to be the main guy in this relationship. I think if you chuck in like someone's going to want his own ideas, I don't actually think it's.
They don't need a
I think it's
strategical
going to end with
coach at
Cadian
all.
leaving.
Yeah, they need someone who
They
can.
need an emotional guy. Yeah.
100%. Yeah, and I don't know how much that is provided by Exist. I feel like he's so level. He can come through, I imagine, with some good tactics, but I feel like KD needs that emotional backup.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Also, wait,
I
it's
think-
hard to talk about coaches.
Yeah, I think the thing about Esatag is as well, like every conversation about him is that he's an incredible teammate to have, and I think that could be another big thing that just fits into that heroic concept of you need to be all five fingers in a hand type thing, where you all need
Yeah.
to be on the same page. And Esatag is definitely a player that could do that, and he's slotted into to other Danish lineups as well. I think he could do it here, no problem. I mean, it is a risk risk that you're running in the sense that you are dipping in terms of individual form, which is, I mean, any lineup with Esatag on it will suffer from that consequence, but you are offsetting it for a team that kind of needs just everybody to be on the same page, and I think that emotionally he could definitely be a better anchor for this team. That's not a bad shot
Who are
either.
we looking at for here? Because like Tess's and Shush, you probably have to go if you want to justify it firepower wise, because you've got to believe
Yeah.
that Yabi can come back. But I hope something comes out about what's happened to Yabi. I hope there's a reason for this, and it's not like just fizzling out, like his career fizzling out. I think that'd be a real big shame. Because if
I was
Esther
not
comes in for
fizzling out, I was
Yabi,
like
like
19.
this team's like that. You're looking at a team of free support players. It's like OG,
Right,
better
exactly,
IGL.
yeah.
Like this is like not really what you want. So it depends who he comes in for, doesn't it? But I
Right,
think replacing
right.
Shush or Tessus would be crazy. I think the roles they're in, I think they overperform a lot. To be honest, I think if you're looking to upgrade heroic, it's the Orpa, and yeah, we've been here before. It's not going to happen.
I mean, of the two, Tessus is probably the more vulnerable one. I think Shush. I still feel like Shush is untouchable in my eyes.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think like support as a support.
You don't have
supporter, he's
players like
just-
that. You don't have players
he's
like
Yeah,
that.
you
just
don't
so
cut them.
good. It's like
You don't
Yeah.
cut them.
I mean, I can say you don't. I can say sound like perfecto, but you do cut him apparently. But like
No, he
it
left.
just-
It was his choice.
Yeah,
It's perfect
true,
on
true.
electronics choice.
So I feel like guys like Shush and Perfecto in my eyes are just like in most
Yeah.
rosters they just walk into because they are just untouchable. Like to have a support rifler who's as consistent as they are and as good as they are, for me feels like just like really untouchable. I think Tessa's a bit more vulnerability there, but then again, like I said, it all comes back to Yabi, right? Can we get Yabi back to his form? And actually, I think probably like looping the conversation back in circles like we have, like the big change that then would get a player like Yabi, it's definitely mental, right? He's young, he's like 19, 20, whatever. It's a mental thing. They need someone who's just like, maybe not even a coach, but just like some like support and staff member, just like a mental coach, someone who can help them out. Because like that's where like, players like him who's like gone into tier 1 at quite an early age, like made a big jump up from like Copenhagen Flames or whatever. They need just some mental, like it definitely looks like a mental thing rather than anything else.